the piece of advice I think I would give him is try to partner with someone that is good in an area where you are not.
Mm.
And in my case, I was very lucky that my wife is an expert in marketing, and that's certainly not my cup of tea, right? I am able to lean on her and depend on her, and she works, basically for free for now, which is also useful. But if you could find a partner, it doesn't have to be your wife. It could be a colleague. It could be someone else out there that will really complement you and participate in the business and do as much for that business as you can, but just in a different area. I highly recommend that, because you're not going to be able to do everything yourself. Maybe there's someone out there that can, but in most cases, if you have that help and you have that other expertise, you have a better chance of making it rather than doing it on your own.
No. Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com. Grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Mike Mogan. And Mike started out his journey. He took some CAD courses in high school and started designing things. And even in high school, patented a beverage can insulator. Went on to get a civil engineering degree in college, graduated in 2001, and has been working in the industry ever since. Still continues to do so. Was never quite satisfied as the ability to scratch the creative itch. So never really had a good idea before then, but then he was coming along, and he'll tell a little bit, and had an idea that decided to pursue that made more sense. And so did a little bit of research, decided it was worthwhile to pursue, and him and his wife decided to make the dive and do it as a side hustle, which I always call really a second full-time job, because it's exactly what amount of effort it takes. But with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Mike.
Hey, thanks, Devin. Really great to be here. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Excited to have you on. So I just gave the kind of condensed quick overview of a much longer journey, but let's step back a bit and unpack that. So tell us a little bit about how your journey got started in high school, learning CAD and designing your beverage can insulator.
Yeah, I mean, back in high school, my father kind of influenced me in going towards civil engineering. That's what his uncle or his cousin had done that he really looked up to. So I started taking CAD courses in high school. I wanted to get into architecture, but kind of followed my dad's advice. He was a sheet metal mechanic. That's what he did for a living. So he had a lot of tools in the garage, and I was constantly out there working with them. And I really enjoyed working with my hands, but I also enjoyed laying things out in CAD and doing that sort of thing. So, you get to use that creativity on paper, and then, in the garage, I was able to tinker around and actually make some things with my hands, which, really satisfied that creative itch that I had. It was back in high school, and we were bad kids, but we wanted to go out drinking where we shouldn't have been drinking, and I had this bright idea to cut the tops and bottoms off of soda cans, and we did that out in my garage with a Dremel, and you would slide it right over the soda, the beer can, and you couldn't even tell what you were drinking. Well, it was like 25 years later where I look back on that idea, and I was like, man, that was a pretty decent idea, but if we could do it with something else besides aluminum, and we thought about doing it in neoprene, and ended up getting that idea patented, almost 25 years later.
No, that's awesome. So now you start out your journey and say, okay, you're gonna learn CAD. It's a great tool that you can kind of conceptualize and bring a lot of kind of ideas into at least virtual reality, and then be able to a lot of times work from there. Even did a beverage can insulator, and then I think as you then went off to college, you ended up going into civil engineer. Is that right?
Yeah, so when I went into college, I majored in civil engineering. I graduated from Temple University in 2001, and I've been a roadway engineer ever since then. I had some different positions. Went from engineer to project manager to other type of management. But you know, it 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 was a great industry to help me get to where I am, and it allowed me to do the things on the side that I want to do.
Mhm.
Um, it had that flexibility, especially during COVID. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a great profession, but it didn't really give me the satisfaction in where I get to use my creativity all that much, because you're very limited by standards. You have to follow standards in roadway design, and you can only do things certain ways. And if you propose something that's too unique or too innovative, people will look at you crazy, and that costs way too much money. We're using taxpayers' dollars to do this. So I was always looking at trying to be an entrepreneur. That beverage can insulator didn't quite work out, but um, 20, 21 years later into the career is when we came up with a pretty decent idea that we started to pursue seriously.
No, that's awesome. Definitely makes perfect sense. So now one question, because you kind of have pursued both civil engineering on the career side, so to speak, or the full-time job pays the bills type of a thing. And then you sounds like you always want to do creative things, but never quite had that great idea. So it just was, were you kind of just always waiting for that great idea and always wanted to do it, and kind of was always, if anything like a lot of people I know, and probably to myself to a degree, you're always coming up with a lot of ideas, and yet then you wait for a bit or you start to explore them, you're saying, well, that might not have been as good of idea as I thought, and so you're always kind of holding off and waiting for that idea. Was that kind of the case, or did you have some false starts, and did you try and build some businesses and side hustles, or kind of how did that go as you're continuing on with the civil engineering career?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have my invention book, and have a bunch of pages filled out. But never really had an idea that was marketable to the masses, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, it came up with some unique items, but were really, really niche, and probably wasn't worth pursuing. The beverage can insulator, I did pursue that as a side hustle, but trying to recreate the koozie in a different way, it's almost like you needed instructions for some people. It wasn't really the best thing in the world, but thankfully it wasn't a big investment, so I didn't lose my pants on it. But
Hmm.
no, but then when this idea came along with an electric beach wagon, I had the support of my wife, who is an expert in marketing, and I really needed that support in order to pursue that seriously.
Hmm.
um, and I didn't really have her backing on any of my other ideas until this one. So this was the one that it got off the ground a little bit.
No, makes perfect sense. So now, with that, so maybe just to kind of clue people or the audience in, so to speak. So, give us a little bit of background. So, you're working in the civil engineering, background, and continuing on that as a full-time career. Now, how did you kind of come about, or how did you come up with the idea that you're working, or that you guys are doing now? What is it? How did you come up with it, and kind of how did that fit in with the journey?
Yeah, so we live outside of Philadelphia area, and like a lot of people in this area, we vacation down the Jersey Shore. We have a trailer down in Cape May in a campsite. We basically go down there every weekend during the summer. So, it's a 2-hour drive there and back. So we're there basically every weekend. And
Hmm.
before I had kids, we would go to this beach called Higby Beach, and that's where you're allowed to bring your dog. So, we'd be going out to the beach with our dog, and my wife would pack a bunch of stuff, a bunch of gear for the dog. The dog can't overheat, so we have to have a tent. You got to have the food, the water, the whole 9 yards. Well, the problem with Higby Beach is there's like a 200-yard trail through really thick sand in order to get to your beach spot. Uh, so I'd be the one that's lugging all the gear and the dog and everything. through the 200 yards and getting down to the beach. And like, I'm sweaty, frustrated, just stressed out, from the whole unpacking and dragging the stuff to the beach. And I was like, man, there's just got to be an easier way to do this. And it wasn't until we had our first kid, where, then the amount of gear like tripled, right? Instead of a dog, you have a kid and a dog. So there's a lot more stuff to bring. And ultimately, it was a lot more difficult to get down to the beach. And I just had about enough of it. I said, I'm going to do this. We need to look into an electric beach wagon. And I started researching, the market, and found that there was somebody out there building one, the Sandhopper. And, I just thought I could do it better and cheaper than what they were doing it for. So it was the summer of 2020. I built my own prototype, and then, used it down on the beach, made some improvements, and, talked to the wife and said, look, there's one competitor out in this market, and he's out in the West Coast. We live on the East Coast. There's a huge opportunity for these wagons here. We've never heard of it, and we've been going down the beach for years. So they're obviously not lighting the world on fire when it comes to marketing, and that's her specialty. So, was able to convince her. She was on board, and that's when we hired a product development team to do the product development of electric beach wagon, and then what we call e-beach wagon, and then we're off to the races at that point.
So you come up with the idea, and so, and do a little bit of market research and say, okay, then I get it. Every parent, whether it's going to the beach, usually for me, it's or sporting games every week with all the kids, and you have to get the seats, and you have to get the umbrella, and you have to get all their water bottles and their drinks and their snacks, and then all of that. And so, and then it's, those, we usually just use a little wagon. Becomes much harder when you're on the beach and you have the sand, and most of those wagons don't work very well, and you're having to drag them behind. So it definitely makes sense where there's a need. So, and you say, okay, maybe it's an unaddressed need. Your wife is, not probably very well marketed. Your wife's a great marketer, and so it definitely fills that need. And then as you're going through it, you get it started. So now, as you're kind of getting it started, because there's a lot to do. It's everything from designing it, doing, as you did, you were aware of the CAD work, to prototyping, to actually getting it manufactured and built. So kind of how did that process go? Was it smooth, or a lot of mistakes or learning, or kind of how did it go as you're trying to develop the product?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a lot of learning that happened. The amount of time that I thought it was going to take to get that product to market, and the actual amount of time, were two completely different things. But thankfully, we hired professionals to do the design. I'm a civil engineer. I design how to move dirt, right? This is a mechanical, electrical item, industrial item, that requires a lot of knowledge in mechanical, electrical, and industrial engineering. So, we hired one firm, their name is Gemba, to oversee like the product development, the manufacturing, sourcing, and then the oversight of the manufacturing. Gemba hired the product development team, Spline Product Development. They did all the design of the wagon. And then at that point, we had them build a prototype, troubleshoot some issues. After that prototype was good, we did some design refinements, and then we started sourcing the manufacturer. So they put an RFP out to a bunch of different manufacturers to come up with a price estimate per unit. We teamed with the manufacturer at that point, and then they started working on their samples. And through the sampling process, we identified some other tweaks that we wanted to make, and work through those until we were finally ready to get under agreement. With the manufacturer. There were certainly some issues and some lessons learned in coming up with that agreement with the manufacturer that we finally got through. And then they were off to manufacturing and producing the production models.
Hey, sounds like fun. So now, Now that you've done all that, gone through all of that, learned the mistakes as well as the tricks, so to speak, and have the product, and I think you guys are now out on the marketplace. You're selling it. How has it gone? Well received? More of an adoption curve than you anticipated? Rocket ship to the top, or kind of how's it gone as you guys have taken out in the marketplace?
Yeah, so we ordered 432 units. That's based on how many can fit in one container, 108 in each container, and we were hoping to get them by Memorial Day of this past summer. Well, we were up against the clock, and that didn't quite work out as planned. Ran into some problems with logistics. One of our containers got stuck in Oakland for a month and just literally sat there and didn't move, which was very frustrating. But we ended up getting our units at the end of July. So we missed 2/3 of our selling season, in at the Jersey Shore, and did some pre-sales and stuff, but didn't do a Kickstarter campaign or anything like that. We were doing it all through our own website and doing it on our own. But the product is very well received. Everybody loves it. My customers rave about it. The people that rented it from us rave about it, and they're like, we're renting this every year. So not only were we selling them, but we decided to rent them in New Jersey just to try to prove that concept, so that we can have other providers rent them as well. But yeah, I mean, everyone who tries the product loves it, absolutely loves it. It's just the price point is what people struggle with. So it's a $2,400 wagon, right? And it's a hard, big pill to swallow. When people are used to spending like you go on Amazon, you just find a bunch of them for $150. Well, what they don't realize is anything that has low pressure balloon wheels on it, they're $100 a piece essentially. You get a little plastic bucket on balloon wheels made by wheelies, and that thing costs $500. Then you have like a Phoenix Beach Card who has 3 of those wheelies tires, no motor or anything, and you still got to push it, and it's made of aluminum, and that's $1,400. Once you add in the motor and the controller and the throttle, the batteries, all that stuff, and we have a really unique looking product, that is labor intensive to build. So a lot of man hours in the welding and stuff. We got the price point down as low as we could, $2,400 retail price, which is lower than the Sandhopper. But that's the big struggle. So we do find, there are particular customers, and some people can't get over that price point, and we understand we're not going to be able to sell to everybody. But the thing is, everybody wants one. Not everyone can afford one, which is unfortunate. We're doing things to try to get the price point down as much as we can. More mass production, stuff like that. But yeah, everybody loves the product. Some people just get disappointed when they see the price tag.
No, it makes sense. And, that's always, like everything, if you can hit, or everybody will have different price points. And it's always interesting because I'm in the legal services, industry, and we do a lot of patents and trademarks and other things. And sometimes we'll get clients say, hey, that's a great deal as compared to other firms that I've talked with. And then other people will say, oh, that's so expensive. Can I do it myself? And it's, it's kind of that you're never going to make everybody happy with all the features or all the price points. But, it sounds like you fit or kind of found the niche as people that are, finding it a good value for the money, and you're seeing the application, and it sounds like it's going well for you. So that's awesome. So
let me just step in real quick. You said that, can you do it yourself, right? Well, that's one of the lessons I learned in the beverage can insulator. I tried doing it myself, and I dropped the application, like halfway through, because I just, not in the right, I wasn't doing what I should have been doing, and ended up hiring a lawyer like yourself to do that work, because you guys are the professionals, and let the professionals do what they do best, and you do what you do best, stay in your lane.
No, I think that's absolutely correct. I always use the analogy because some reason, and this is now just going off on a complete tangent away from your journey, but we'll circle back in a second. But it's interesting, especially we getting into the service space industry, because if you get products, it's like, okay, well, can I really build this myself? Not really. And so, usually if you can provide a good product and it's something physical and tangible, people are going to say, okay, I really don't want to, or I can't build this myself, or it's going to be more time and effort. And when you get into the service space industry, I think with Google and YouTube and DIY videos and everything else, everybody's like, well, can I do it myself? So I always use the analogy of, I always say, yeah, you can do it yourself. It's kind of like if you wanted to build your own house, you could build shelter over your head with very little or no or help, or maybe you go watch a YouTube video. It's not going to be the same thing as when you're actually having a professional contractor and builder that does it and have the experience. You're going to have a much different product between the two, and yet people sometimes start to make that disconnect. So I think it's always a good lesson to learn that just because you sometimes quote unquote can do yourself doesn't mean that you should, or it's going to be the same quality. And so I think that that's a great point. Well, now as we've kind of caught up to the present day a bit of your journey, I always like to transition to the two questions I asked towards the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What did you learn from it?
I think the worst business decision was, it had to have been um, getting my first container shipped to the West Coast to Oakland in an effort to try to expedite getting the product, right? So I was listening to someone who was not an expert in logistics. And when we approached the logistics companies with that idea, they tried to steer us in the other direction of going to the East Coast, because you in the long run you may not save time by going to the West Coast. And in our case, we ended up getting so much further delayed that it really impacted our selling season. So, in that situation, it's like I saw the really shiny object over there and I wanted to go get it, and that's what I went for. And in reality, I should have been listening to the experts and not the people who were guiding me towards that decision. So, listen to the people who do their thing every day, and have those trusted advisors that you can lean on.
No, and I think it probably just highlights what we just discussed before, which I think that's a lesson that I'm still learning, because sometimes I think I do it better, but a lot of times, you kind of, especially I think as a entrepreneur, as someone that's, typically type A personality, I'll figure it out, especially when you're starting out and you don't have a big budget and you don't, and everything else, you say, well, I can figure it out and I'll get it done. And sometimes you do, you're able to, and for some of the things that you work on, you have to get it done yourself because you can't afford the experts. But then there's always a transition. Sometimes you just need to say, hey, I'm going to save up, I'm going to do or get the experts because this is too salient and important to the business. And other times it's also that transition to where sometimes you may start out doing it very crappily yourself because there isn't another option. But then as the business gets up and going, you need to quickly say, okay, this can help the business if I'm not trying to do this all myself, and if I get the experts on board that can help to grow the business. So I think that's definitely a good mistake to learn from, and a one that's easy to make. Second question I always ask now is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
The piece of advice I think I would give them is, try to partner with someone that is good in an area where you are not. And in my case, I was very lucky that my wife is an expert in marketing, and that's certainly not my cup of tea, right? I am able to lean on her and depend on her, and she works, basically for free for now, which is also useful. But if you could find a partner, it doesn't have to be your wife. It could be a colleague. It could be, someone else out there that will really complement you and participate in the business and do as much for that business as you can, but just in a different area. I highly recommend that, because you're not going to be able to do everything yourself. Maybe there's someone out there that can, but in most cases, if you have that help and you have that other expertise, you have a better chance of making it rather than doing it on your own.
No, I think that's definitely a great takeaway. It's one that kind of reflects back to, even if you can do it, you can't be an expert in everything. You might be able to do it or get it all done at some point, but you're going to have that trade-offs. And, that's things I've had to find where as I bring different people on and that I find, oh, they can do it a lot better than I can. It's a lot better work product. And it's a lot better. It looks nicer to the clients and better, or provides a better experience. And while I was doing it on my own when it was earlier on the business, is definitely, I think is a great thing to learn. So I think and I think that when you're starting a business, if you can find the person that's, I don't know, polar opposite, you don't want to argue about everything with the business, but certainly has a different skill set, a different frame of mind, different point of view, it can definitely be helpful to the business because you're getting pushback, you're getting different ideas and different thoughts as you otherwise wouldn't if you were just get someone that or thinks along the same lines as you do. So I think that's a great piece of advice. Well, as we wrap up, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, I would say just head to our website, ebeachwagon.com. There's all of our contact information is under the contact page. Feel free to follow us on social. We're on every social media outlet out there. Certainly if you're a potential customer, I would definitely recommend signing up for our email list because that's where all of our specials come out through. So if you're interested in one, you want a good deal, we have Black Friday coming up and I have a feeling that there might be a deal coming out here soon.
All right. Well, just enough of a teaser to get people excited without giving too much of a teaser to give away what that deal is. But definitely encourage people to reach out, connect on all or for any or all of the reasons mentioned. And definitely appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review so we can make sure to share these journeys with all of the other people out there that are going along their own journeys. And on that note, if you ever need help along your journey with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we are always here to help. Well, thank you again, Mike, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Yeah, thank you very much, Devin. Appreciate it.